Chip to know. Good point. I noticed your ring. What's it from?
Okay.
It's this year's Junior College National Championship.
At 7 p.m., I'm going to call the meeting to order. And Renee, if we could please have a roll call.
Mr. Brewer,
Here.
Mr. McDaniel,
Here.
Ms. McCowan,
Here.
Mr. Parker, Ms. Byrd,
Here.
Mr. McClure,
Here.
Mr. Griffith,
Here.
Ms. Kendall,
Here.
Mr. Jablonski. We have a quorum.
We had a request to remove item number 3 from the consent docket. So our first consent items, number 1, consideration of approval, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of minutes of the August 10th, 2023 regular Planning Commission meeting. And item number 2, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of short form plat SFP-2324-3, consideration of a short form plat submitted by Tammy McCown from Cornerstone Surveying for Jenkins Place for 0.42 acres of property located at 1727 South Jenkins. Does any member of the commission wish to remove any item from those 2 consent dockets? Does any member of the audience wish to remove an item from the consent docket? Seeing none, I would take a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote.
I guess I should stop eating now.
Everyone has, motion carried 7-0.
Moving to our non-consent items, we have a request for a recusal. If we could please receive that motion.
I'd like to make a motion that Commissioner McCown recuse from item 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
I second that.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Moving to our non-consent items, item number 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of short form plat SFP-2324-4, consideration of a short form plat submitted by Our Lady of Lebanon Pyxis LLC for Lady of Mercy for 1.43 acres of property located at 500 Alameda Street. Do we have a staff presentation for this? Or any questions by commission for staff? Okay. Seeing none, are there any audience comments for this item or planning commission discussion? Seeing none, I would take a motion for this item.
I move to approve.
I second it.
And a vote, please.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 6-0.
Moving to our next items, number 4 and 5. Item number 4, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2324-41, Holiday Heights Real Estate LLC requests amendment of Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from low-density residential designation to office designation for 0.22 acres of property located at 1413 North Crawford Avenue. And item number 5, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-11, Holiday Heights Real Estate LLC requests rezoning from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to SPUD Simple Planned Unit Development for 0.22 acres of property located at 1413 North Crawford Avenue. And if we have our staff presentation.
Good evening, Melissa Navarro with the Planning Department. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay, we have an application from Holiday Heights Real Estate LLC for a Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan amendment from low-density residential designation to office designation for the property located at 1413 North Crawford Avenue. This is how the existing Norman 2025 Land Use Plan map use look like right now. You can see the north and on the west part of the city is low-density residential, and then on the east and south, commercial. And this is the way it's going to look after the proposed amendment. We also have a rezoning application from R1 single-family dwelling district to a spot simple plan unit development from the same applicant to the same address. And this is the existing zoning that we have, is similar to the map that we have seen before. We have a single-family dwelling district on the north and on the west part. And then on the south, we have commercial, and on the east, light industrial. This is the existing land use, very similar to the previous maps as well. And over here, we have a nursing facility called Holiday Heights. This is an aerial of the property. You see it fronts on Crawford Avenue. This is an aerial perspective. You see there's an alleyway in between Holiday Heights and the subject property, and you can see some commercial on the rear of the property on the west side. This is Crawford looking north. The property is on the right side, and this one is looking south, and this is Holiday Heights on the left. And this is the alleyway. This one is the south of the property. And this is the proposed site plan. The applicant requests to rezone from R1 single-family residential to spot simple plan unit development to allow commercial uses that include supporting activities for the nursing facility Holiday Heights, including laundry services, parking, storage, and administrative work. The proposed uses of the site should not cause significant changes on the traffic in the area. Staff forwards this request to rezone from R1 single-family dwelling district to spot simple plan unit development and ordinance number 02324-11 to the Planning Commission for consideration and recommendation to City Council.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions by commission for staff? All right. Any questions from the audience or any planning to commission discussion for this item? Seeing none, I would take a motion
I'll second.
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-0.
Okay, moving to our next, did you announce it? Moving to our next item, it's number 6 and 7. Item number 6, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2324-42. Sooner Traditions LLC requests amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from office designation and low-density residential designation to commercial designation for 1.33 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of Lindsay Street and Berry Road. And item number 7, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-12. Sooner Traditions LLC requests rezoning from CO Suburban Office Commercial and R1 Single Family Dwelling District to SPUD Simple Planned Unit Development for 1.33 acres of property generally located at northeast corner of Lindsay Street and Berry Road. If anybody has not, just before we get to the staff presentation, if there are comments for this item, there are comment cards on the back. If you don't mind filling that out, and we'll get to those in just a moment too. But if you will fill those out and bring those up if you have them in the meantime. Thank you. Staff presentation.
Hi, Laura Hoggett with the Planning Department. All right, so we have an application from Sooner Traditions LLC for a 2025 land use plan amendment from office and low-density residential designation to commercial. This is at the northeast corner of Lindsay Street and Berry Road. It's 1027 and 1035 South Berry. So this is showing the existing 2025. This is one tract. This kind of just been zoned, and the land use was split in the middle of the lot. So on the north side is low-density residential, and on the south side is office. Sorry, we're clearly having issues with the mouse today. Is it the right or the left side? They're both going back. Okay, so they're proposing commercial for the entire tract. And then we also have a zoning application from CO Suburban Office Commercial and R1 Single Family Dwelling District to SPUD Simple Planned Unit Development. So this is the same, it's split in the middle. The north side is R1 and the south side on the hard corner is CO. They're requesting the SPUD to allow for a restaurant and to tailor their landscaping requirements with a tree preservation section. I'm sorry, I would show you the site plan, but obviously it's not working. It should be in your packet. Sorry, I'll give you a page number.
We are.
Okay, the site plan is on page 73 of the packet. It's magic. It's moving. Bryce is magic. Okay. Will you keep going? Okay, here's our zoning. This is existing. So R1's the north half, CO is the south half. You'll go to the next one. Okay, so here it is as it exists. This is actually not current. The building on the north side has been demoed. The building on the corner is still there. It was used as a law office, but it was originally a house. Next, please. So this is an aerial. On the top is the subject tract. To the south is Penny Hill. Catty Corner is a vacant gas station. And then across the street is gas station, car wash, food truck. So looking north on Berry, this is if you're north of the property, looking south on Berry. Okay, so looking east on Lindsay, right? Yeah. Looking west on Lindsay. Okay, and here's the site plan for the SPUD, showing the restaurant on the corner with the deck along the street frontages. And then there is access to the lot to the east on the top, the north, sorry. Okay, and we do have 9.5% protest within the notification area, and then we did receive one to the north out of the notification area. Sorry, flipping around. Okay, so staff forwards this request for rezoning to a SPUD in ordinance number 2324-12. And, sorry, I got all out of order. And resolution 2324-42 for Planning Commission's consideration. The applicant is here with the presentation, and then I'm available for questions as well. Sorry, that was a little messy there.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for staff? Laura, would you mind just confirming the setback line on the north, if you don't mind? And I know the applicant may want to speak on this too, but
Yes.
there was some variations within the packet on that north setback building line. Let me rephrase, the north building line distance, not setback line. And in particular, the differences that I had seen was in the language of the PUD, it was 190 feet. The Exhibit A was 194, and then some of the other exhibits referenced 90 feet. So I just want to be 100% sure we had a clear definition within the application.
So from my understanding, it would have to go off the site plan and do the 190, and then they would have to come back with a site plan amendment if they're going to change their building layout on the property more than is allowed in the SPUD ordinance.
And can I add one thing?
Go for it.
If I could just add one thing, I think the other site plan that you're talking about was attached to the traffic report.
It was Exhibit C for the green space and on the traffic report as well, yeah.
Okay, and those will be updated. This, getting everything together was one of the reasons that it was delayed, and we apologize for that. This will be updated before it goes to city council. The one with the traffic report is not correct.
Right, so Exhibit A is the correct site plan. So that's the one that'll be in every exhibit for,
So just to confirm, the understanding is 194 or 190?
190.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Okay, moving to our applicant presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Gunnar Joyce with Rieger Law Group on behalf of the applicant, which is Sooner Traditions LLC. And we have a development team with us tonight. Rick McKinney with McKinney Architects is the architect on the project that's here. Steve Rollins with Arc Engineering is the civil engineer on the project. BJ Hawkins with TEC Traffic Engineer. BJ, are you? I got you. And then Hunter Miller as well with Sooner Traditions LLC, the developer of the project. This is the location, just as Laura said, it is actually a little unique. It is a single platted lot, so no plat is required. But over time, it got zoned and 2025 comp planned separately right down the middle of a single platted lot. So this proposal tonight looks like two. It's actually one platted lot. We're going to bring it back to the original plat, just one singular lot. Bryce, you want me to click, or I'm going to give it a shot? Right goes forward, left goes back. That went back. I got it. All right. This is the location with an aerial, and what I'm calling out here is that we are on a hard corner, obviously, of Lindsay and Berry. So it's a main thoroughfare in Norman, and you can see every corner here is of a commercial use. You have Penny Hill on the southeast. You have a Starbucks that is new on the southwest, and to the north, northeast is commercial zoning, and northwest is commercial zoning, and we are proposing to keep that consistent throughout all corners of this hard corner tonight for the northeast corner. Here's the existing zoning in 2025. The map on the left is the zoning map. As you can see, we have commercial zoning on every corner except this one. Move the mouse there. And then the 2025 designation has commercial and residential. And so our proposal tonight is to bring both of those to commercial. The zoning is going to be a SPUD, and the only change to the allowable uses that exist today is just a restaurant. So we'll get into that, but usually when we bring a commercial SPUD, there's an exhibit for allowable uses, and you guys have all seen them. It goes, 1 page to 2 pages of all the potential uses that could be there. This list is 3 uses. It's residential, it's office on the southern half, and it is 1 restaurant. So just 3 allowable uses in the SPUD. And again, here's the proposal. It'll be a proposal to make it red commercial on all corners of this hard corner intersection. So here's the preliminary site plan in context. As you can see, the proposal for this project is a Hal Smith restaurant capped at 5,000 square feet. So this SPUD locks in a maximum square footage, no more than 5,000 square feet, and additionally locks in single story. So there's not a single zoning ordinance in Norman that keeps you limited to one story. So that is above and beyond every district, even residential. You obviously can have two-story houses. So this is a major concession, one story. It is locked in at 5,000 square feet. It is locked in at no more than 83 parking spots. Substantial landscape buffer. It's 18 feet 3 inches on the north, 25 feet of landscape buffer on the west edge, and 10 feet of landscape buffer on the east edge. We'll get into a more up-close picture, but it's also on the south, a deck that wraps around some existing trees. And this SPUD has some very strict and stringent tree preservation language. So basically, best efforts to preserve all the trees possible. If one mature tree does have to come out, the applicant will do 2 trees, at least 2-inch caliper for every one that comes out. So a pretty intense tree preservation and replanting requirement within the document. So again, I touched on some of these, but you can also see as we zoom in here, we are pulling the building to the hard corner, which is one of the new modern development techniques to activate that pedestrian corner. As you know, the city has recently done the Lindsay Street streetscape project. The staff report notes that one of the intents behind that project was to revitalize and redevelop this area. So it's exactly what we have tonight, an applicant and a developer that is making a capital investment, new funds, new project, into the area that the city has designed for new development. Again, only one allowable use. The developer has met with community members multiple times throughout this project before we filed, and one of the reasons why we have not updated all the site plans yet is that we've made concessions even after the filing and discussions. One of those is the setback line. So let's talk about that for a second. Originally, when initially filed, it was a 90-foot setback, and where that was approximately was the start of the parking lot. Now, there was never any plan to move the building after approval. As you know, every SPUD is tied to a site plan, and you can't change it without coming back to you for a site plan amendment. There's very minor adjustments that can be made, up to 10 and 20% of minor items, but the neighbors wanted more assurances that we were locked in to the southwest corner of the site. And so what happened was we have locked in, not only is it 90 feet, now it's 190 feet. So an additional 100 feet of building setback. And what that means is, again, you'd have to do a site plan amendment if we were going to reposition the building, which again is a full action to you all. But in theory, if we were just moving the building but not changing anything else in the SPUD, all you'd be looking at was the layout of the building within the buildable box, if you will. So if we moved it north, you really wouldn't have much reason to deny the moving of the building. Now, if we move it north past 190 feet, not only are we just reorienting to the site, we're also asking you to lift and change a building setback. So it's another layer of concession that the developer is making, that we can no longer just do a simple site plan amendment to you. We would have to do a full change of the SPUD, specifically the building setback line, to move it any far north than 190. So the little discrepancy of 190 to 194 is that currently we're at 194 feet. We think that that 4 feet falls within the administrative adjustment for a site plan. Since we're not at final building permit construction plans yet, that 4 feet's a little bit of wiggle room that could come out when we do final construction drawings. So 190 feet, it is an additional 100 feet from where we filed this application. There's a robust discussion about the change there. And with that, I want to go into Rick McKinney, talk through the design of the project and the architecture and kind of the desires and goals. So Rick, please. It's good timing, good walk-up song.
Apologize for that. Thank you, Gunnar. Pleased to meet with you. I'm Rick McKinney with McKinney Partnership, and we've worked with the ownership group on this for, quite a while, over a year, I think. And I think this is an amazing site. First of all, we are approaching this like this is the beginning, the gateway of the University of Oklahoma. And that's where you start to see improvements that resemble the university and the bridge down below. And so we treat this site with a lot of respect, and it will get a high level of design. This is a very real concept, but it is not the final design. But this is the massing and the materials and the deck and the trees, and that intent is what we will maintain through our design process. I mentioned the trees, and I know you all are familiar with the site, but there's 3 magnificent trees there along Lindsay Street, and we will save those. We will protect those during construction, and obviously we'll take care of those on the life of the project. But that is, we are designing largely around those trees. One of the main features is this wraparound deck, which we've all eaten at the Mont, and we obviously like to eat at the Mont. Well, this is kind of a different Mont feel, where we're right on the corner. You feel the traffic, you feel the energy, and it's right next to the pedestrian walkways. Bicycles can come, and we have a sidewalk that goes directly into bike racks right by the entry to the restaurant. And then we pulled the building to the street, as Gunnar said, the hard corner. It's away from the residential neighborhood. If they go into the evening and they have dining and music on the deck, which they will probably, it's away from the houses. That noise would come into the intersection, and the building would shield the neighborhood from that. In addition to that, we had always called for a screen wall around the property, and the owners made an agreement and a concession to make that an 8-foot masonry screen wall. We had also spoken with the potential developer to the east, and he has no problem with his development. In fact, he said, if you'd like to open up to our development, we can. And we said, well, we'll entertain that idea. We spoke with the neighbors. They would rather we not open up to the residential to the east, because that might be a cut-through to get to Berry Road. And so we've agreed not to do that. The landscape, we have separated and split the landscape. Where's my... Which button is this here?
I think the right one's going to take us backwards right there.
Okay. I just wanted to point out the landscape. We could have had more parking spaces on this site, but we added a central landscape area with seating, and also that will be a location of some of our detention areas around the site. But we wanted to break up the parking. Instead of having a large area of field of parking, we've separated it into 2 areas. The setbacks, we are landscaping heavily on the north and on both sides, and we will also be adding trees on the west to provide more shade for the building. Traffic-wise, we pulled the traffic in and out locations as far away from the intersection as possible. The entrance on Lindsay Street is one way in, one way out. So we're not going to be fighting traffic on that intersection. And then the other exit is all the way to the north on Berry Road. Lighting was another concern, and we will use low-profile, sharp cutoff parking lot lighting that will not allow any light leak into the surrounding neighborhoods. We want to have the minimum amount of light, but we want to meet code and make it safe, but we're going to keep that screened and shielded from the neighbors. Accessibility, the materials will be a brick, cast stone, a lot of glass along the street, looking out to the street, so you'll be able to see the activity in the restaurant while it's open at night. Should be a really nice festive place. So that's the general character of what we're planning for the restaurant, and the design will be developed as the project moves ahead, but that is the overall intent of everything we are committing to tonight.
So as I hoped, Rick hit on a lot of items that I've got slides coming up on, so I'll move quick now. One of those is a commitment to the stormwater drainage plan on the site has to have low-impact development techniques and best management practices. I think now when I sit up here and talk projects to you, it's pretty much industry standard. Norman has done a good job to make this known that this is what you want, and again, this developer has done that in spades with actually drafting in Section 3C of the SPUD says that exact paragraph, that will utilize low-impact development techniques. One of the exhibits is a proposal of what those techniques look like and where. We have bioswales, rain gardens, perforated drain pipes, and landscape drains throughout the site. Traffic and access, Rick talked about it, so I'll go quick, but right in, right out only here. TEC, BJ Hawkins did prepare a memo for this project. Since there's no plat involved, it's not required, but since traffic has been brought up, a memo has been produced. A TIA was done previously on the site, again, not required, but essentially showed that the expected traffic from this development would only impact AM and PM peak times by a second or less every time. The recommendation for that was simple light signal timing mechanisms that can be done. So no improvements needed. The City of Norman has reviewed both the memo and that prior TIA and recommended approval. And again, Rick just said it, but full cutoff lighting, Norman has a very intense commercial outdoor lighting standard that is specifically drafted into this SPUD, which means that there cannot be any spillover to neighbor residential property. It actually requires, at final building permit stage, a photometric plan prepared by a professional engineer that shows that there is no spillover onto residential neighboring properties. So that is something, again, that we make the commitment now, but there is still a final step when building permits are pulled that is again reviewed to ensure that there's no spillover. And like Rick said, another concession that was made in some of these meetings that we've never done before was drafted in low-level LED lighting in the parking lot to both ensure that there's still adequate lighting for safety, for pedestrian use, but to continue to commit that there will be no spillover to the residences. So that, again, is another change post-filing. So project summary, this is a redevelopment and revitalization of this area, which is, again, not my words. That comes from the staff report that the Lindsay Streetscape project desires for this area. It's a thoughtful design that respects the neighbors to the north while continuing to keep this gateway into the university something that's fun and exciting. And then many concessions have been made, the 8-foot brick masonry wall, right in, right out, only onto Lindsay. And I think personally, and I probably nerd out on this because I write the document, but the biggest one to me is it's a single story and there is only one allowable use. So it's residential and office that exists today, and the only use change is a maximum 5,000 square foot restaurant. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for the applicant?
I may have misunderstood, but Rick, when you were talking about the additional landscaping that was added, did you say that the landscaping strip central to the site, there's seating there? Is that right? Oh, okay. Sure. Okay.
Cameron, you can't really see it, but this call out here is, it says benches. So the proposal, if we got really zoomed in, was some benches and seating.
Any other questions by commission for the applicant? Okay, moving to the audience comments, just a reminder, everyone will be given 3 minutes to speak. If you would like a 30-second warning before your time is up, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to give the full time to you to allow you to have the maximum time to speak, and then I'll thank you for your comments when you're done. From experience, that time does go quick, and I just want to thank all of you for coming later than usual. We do appreciate your feedback on here. I mentioned this before we started, but also, there is an additional round when something goes to City Council that can also receive protest or support, as well as comment to the City Council meeting as well. So with that said, I'm going to start with Jen, and I apologize for mispronouncing names in advance. Dennis Yarbrough. Dennis Yarbrough. Thank you. When you come up, if you will just say your name and address to start too, please.
Hello. My name is Dennis Yarbrough. I'm at 803 South Berry Road. It's north here, just below Brooks. I just want to point out that we've talked to the developer. There's still a bunch of inaccuracies in this presentation, and I won't say they're misrepresentations, but they're just inaccurate. I think this is because it was rushed in. They've had a long time to work on it, but still, just as you pointed out, there's still some things that are just not quite right in the application, in the packet. And one of the things that was mentioned to staff is that they had one protest letter outside the notification zone. There were more than that. It's just one that shows up on the scale of the map that you presented. So there's more outside of that area than just one. They talked about reducing curb cuts. Yeah, it goes from 3 to a double wide on Berry, and there's also 2 that comes in off from Lindsay. On page 63 of the plat, it's still, of the application, it talks about a commercial shopping center. That's not right, because what he was saying was there's going to be one additional use, which would be a restaurant, but in the application or in the packet that was given and presented, it's a commercial shopping center still listed there, so that needs to be corrected. The contour map question, there's a drainage from the north property line, and once that drainage is sheet flow now, it goes across to the south, all across this lot and on down to Lindsay and some of it to Berry. What happens to that flow once this masonry wall gets across there? That water's going to go somewhere. So where's that going to go? The protest map, like I mentioned, some of it's just the process that Norman uses to log protests. All you do is recognize 350 feet, and then you say there's only 9% or so protests. Well, that's area. That's not people. And people live here. It's not just land that's there. It's the people there. And so one of the things that you have to remember is that the people have to be there, and the person that owns the most property doesn't have the most say-so. That's just not, that's like feudal times when the lord of the land did all the deciding. So we just need to fix these inaccuracies before y'all have to vote on it, because, you know, the whole packet was like 225 pages. That's a lot for y'all to digest in 2 weeks, 2 days. We had to go through it. They've had months to work on it. There's still inaccuracies there. So I'm asking that you reject it. If you can't reject it, let's at least postpone it until we can get some of these inaccuracies cleared up and everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Moving to David, I'm so sorry, Nairens, thank you. I apologize, I'm so sorry. And just name, address, and we'll get started.
David Nairns, David and Kathy Nairns at 902 Cary Drive. So our backyards are the closest to this property. Up at the northeast corner of this property is where my daughter lives and where we live. So our backyards back up against this, so it would affect us very much. We speak in opposition to this. This whole area has been and still is a residential area. The whole way down Berry is residential. The property to the east of this is residential. This whole thing is residential. They took the house down and got the one house at the south end. So there's no traffic. It's quiet. There's no traffic at all. We don't need a traffic study to tell us that all of a sudden there's 83 cars there. It's going to really impact the traffic going down Berry Road. So we don't want the exhaust, the cars, 83 cars in our backyard. This is a much better plan that's been presented in the past. But this is a residential area, and so you as a planning commission has one simple decision to make. Do you want this to continue to be an extension of the residential area down Berry all the way to Lindsay, or do you want this now to be an extension of the commercial area coming across Lindsay? That's the bottom line. We want this to remain residential and quiet. This would turn this into commercial and extend the Lindsay commercial property. And then just to the east of this is residential. So we speak in opposition to this.
Thank you very much. Susan Meyer.
Hi, I'm Susan Meyer, 808 Cary Drive. I just want to point out that the Lindsay right in, right out, that means every person going to that restaurant has to be on Berry Road. Every person. Every server, So you're taking Berry Road, which is a residential street, 2-lane, and it's an emergency services corridor since 1960. And you're creating a pinch point there for emergency services. That's really important, and you need more data. The traffic data study that they referred to as seconds, that didn't consider Starbucks' 150,000 cars that go through Starbucks. So I want you to be aware that this affects Berry Road a lot, an awful lot. It's a 2-lane residential road. The next thing is, I'm going to kind of mirror the things about, you've got some inaccurate data. Please get everything right and on paper before you vote yes or no. But at least don't have office space in there. Don't have an Exhibit C that has the same legal authority as Exhibit A. That's just not right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. James Akey, sorry.
James Akey, 819 and 815 Cary Drive. I'm just north of there. We had a wonderful meeting with Mr. Miller. We just need to get all of the stuff on paper so that we can have time to really look at it. So I'm just recommending that you just postpone this until, it is 200-plus pages, and there are a lot of inaccuracies. And until we get the hard copy, as they say, I think a postponement would be a judicious decision. Thank you.
Christine Akey.
Christine Akey at 819 Cary Drive. I was basically going to point out some of the issues that Ms. Myers brought up about the traffic on Berry. We have a lot of difficulty getting off of on Brook Street going west because the traffic from the intersection of Lindsay and Berry will back all the way up so that you cannot go south on Brook Street. You're stuck at the stop sign. So this is something that's been relatively new, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 years. As the food truck was installed by the gas station, we have Starbucks. So it's become more of a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Schrank.
Patrick Schrank, 1309 Rebecca Lane, so I'm on the south side and on the west side of Lindsay and Berry intersection. I support this proposal. I think it can be a little bit better. I think some mixed uses in there would be really nice to have some residential kind of buffer that north side. But overall, I think that this is an improvement. Lindsay needs help. Lindsay is rough. It's really rough. And it needs some investment. And so I applaud the developer for coming in and wanting to improve this area, improve Lindsay Street, and I think some small tweaks to this could be make it a really good development. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Morgan.
Christy Morgan, 2601 Smoking Oak Road, and I'm actually in favor of this proposal. As someone else mentioned, West Lindsay Street, actually several have mentioned, West Lindsay Street, we often refer to it as the gateway to the University of Oklahoma. And yet in recent years, many of the establishments that have come in have been dispensaries and plasma centers and things of that nature that do little to improve the stretch of road. Then that's the first impression that many visitors to our town. The dining options in this area are limited. They're beyond fast food chains. You have Velvet Taco that opened in recent years in the location that was operated by McAllister's before they moved to the north side of town. Legends has persisted through construction and through the pandemic. But the offerings beyond that that are in walking distance for many of us that live in that area are just not very, there's very few options. We drive to other parts of town for dining options. When new offerings do come in, first the Starbucks, now potential House Smith offerings, are met with resistance. Aside from something that those in the area can enjoy, we need to encourage space for visitors to our town to stop and spend their money in Norman. A restaurant like the proposed one that has outdoor seating and dining is going to do that. The vacant corner is not a welcoming sight for our out-of-town visitors. I would say House Smith Restaurant Groups are a known entity. They have a proven business model and success rate in our community, and I, for one, am excited to see someone who's willing to put an investment in that corner that's been remained vacant for so long.
Thank you. Dana O'Rourke or Overy? Thank you, sorry.
No worries. It's hard to pronounce. I'm Dana Drury, live at 951 South Berry Road. So I'm within the protest, I'm within the 300 whatever. I just want to say that I very much appreciate the applicant's efforts to make this, it looks beautiful. The changes that they have tried to make us, to appease to us as far as the actual land use, I love it. One of the things that I enjoy about living where I live, in contrast to the previous speaker, I love being in close walking distance to a number of great restaurants. Legends, El Sombrero, the Taco Truck, Campus Corner. We walk to dinner. We love it. It's great there. I'm not against having a restaurant there. What we hear is the land use part of the plan, but I think I speak for everybody. Where's the transportation part of the plan? Because living on Berry Road, and to echo what several other people have said, Berry Road north of Lindsay, it is a residential street. It is a residential street. You cannot access, direct access to any commercial development on Berry Road until you get to Main Street. Main Street intersection with Berry has dedicated right turn lanes and left turn lanes. It's wider. You have the transportation infrastructure to handle a commercial development. Berry and Lindsay, just north of Lindsay, is a residential street. And now you want to put a commercial development right in there without planning for the commercial type of traffic that you're going to have. And to me, it's a non-starter. But if, for example, I would be for this if the only way in and out is on Lindsay. Everybody's so concerned about, oh, we don't want to back up traffic on Lindsay. Why not? You want to back up traffic in front of my house instead? Okay. Again, I'm a non-starter until there is something underway with the traffic on Berry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other audience comments that I haven't received cards for on this item? Okay, thank you. And thank you again for everyone who came to speak. Moving to Planning Commission discussion. None? No discussion items? Surprise.
I'll make a few comments. I've been following the multiple site plans that have been proposed on this site over the years, and I'm torn on this, and really in both ways. I do think that this is a much improved site plan with the siding of the building. Really like the proposal with the trees and the deck, and I don't think you can count on a certain restaurant being there in perpetuity, but the operator is certainly a known entity, and that's exciting to have somebody of that caliber. my primary concerns are just to the number of parking spaces. Now, this is a little bit of a challenging site. Lindsay Berry, unlike other parts of Core Norman, I would say, this site and this intersection was really planned around a car, and so you're going to have parking spaces somewhere. It's not a highly walkable corridor. There's also a high turnover with in parking and kind of necessary volume that occurs with a house meth restaurant. And given that they are the known operator here, there is likely a need for this many parking spaces. Unfortunately, it's a car-oriented development, but it's also been planned as a car-oriented intersection over time as well. And so my other concern was just more to the and maybe this is a question to the inconsistency in the report, and that's been a question of those comments from the public. So I just want to make sure that that's addressed before we do vote on this, whatever we need to do before, so we do know what we're voting on. And I think there was a comment that there were allowable uses in the SPUD. Just want to clarify what those allowable uses are as well.
It looks like you're ready to make a comment on that. It looks like that was a question for you, so please go right ahead.
So first of all, I want to address, in the SPUD document, Exhibit A is the site development plan. It says 194 feet. The applicant is correct that there are some variances. They have an area that they could move this within that few feet. Under Exhibit B, the allowable uses state in the SPUD document, again, this is the controlling document of the site, that there is a restaurant with the associated outdoor patio, parking, ancillary uses. There's a detached one-family dwelling, and then office is the other allowed use on this site. What the individual is referring to, and it's our fault, I apologize. We had a lot going on, I won't lie, and that is staff's fault. That does say for a commercial shopping center. That is not correct. That will be fixed before it goes forward to City Council. So I do apologize for that. And as far as, I want to address one more thing, as far as the, yes, on the open space document, I believe also in the SPUD, the open space document is not the controlling document for the SPUD. It is in there to show the open space, but the site development plan is the controlling document. So where the building setback line is different on the open space diagram, that will be fixed before it goes forward to City Council. And then the other one that I was talking about a minute ago, the one that is in the TEC report, again, this is coming from a different agency, so it wasn't with the applicant at the time, but this building setback line is wrong on that one, and that one will also be fixed before it goes forward to City Council.
Okay, and my primary concern with the inconsistency was the commercial shopping center, so I just want to make sure that if we're voting on this today, that we're voting on that under the assurance that that is not an allowable use.
That is correct. That was only in the staff report.
Any other questions for staff or commissioner comments?
I'd like to make a comment. We've seen this development come to the Planning Commission on various, with various types of buildings being placed on it. When I look at this site, I see a minimum use a building that's pulled to the very front, pulled away from the, hopefully from the residential side of things. when I see that tells me that the builder, the developer is really trying to listen to what's being said. Now, understand if it's commercial, it's commercial, and no one wants commercial in their backyard. When I look at the corners, I look at the one south, look at the one to the southeast, also look at the one southwest, northwest. They're all commercial. When you look at this site, you think it's going to have, that corner needs to be really commercial. So I want to say I appreciate the developer listening to the folks. I really appreciate that. From what it sounds like, he's had a couple of meetings with you guys. But to me, this should be a hard corner, should be a commercial corner. And I like the fact that he's pulled that building up. So hopefully away from the residential side. So that's just the one comment I'm going to make instead of a large strip center. So.
Just one additional comment. I have heard that there were additional concessions made from the developer to the neighborhood residents with concerns, and I wasn't sure if those were in the plan yet, but those would be concessions I would recommend be included as part of the plan to before going to city council, if those were neighborhood concerns and the developer was okay with those concessions.
So, thank you for bringing that up. I probably did a poor job of illustrating that, but those concessions have been drafted in already. So LED lighting already in there, masonry wall already in there. The only discrepancy that has not been fully cleaned up is just that setback line, and it's only on the drainage plan. And honestly, the drainage plan isn't supposed to have the setback lines anyways. Miss on our part to not just pull them off, but everything else, all the concessions are in there, not only shown, but also in the document itself.
I have a question for you, sir. The 83 parking spaces, is that based on seating for the business, I assume?
Yeah, yes, that comes from Hal himself. That's a number that is a firm number that has had substantial discussion around it, and it is the minimum possible to make this site work.
Okay. And I guess part of the reason was because the lady pointed out, why do we have to only have one way in when it comes to Lindsay? Why is Berry not getting backed up? And would that be in your answer of the 83 hard? It would be probably improbable to bring another entrance closer to the building so that there are two in and outs on Berry, which would, I would think, help with some of that congestion, as well as them making it accessible to Lindsay in and out as well. What is the reason for y'all's reason? Because I wasn't here the first time that this was brought, so this is new to me.
No, two really good points there. I think one, any more entryway point is going to reduce parking. So just what you said, that's number one. Two is, and BJ, I thought I got to avoid you, but you want to come up and talk a little bit on traffic. When we went through numerous iterations the first time, staff was one of the main drivers into not wanting a left-hand turn from Lindsay into the site, especially since we're so close to that signalized intersection. The fear was that we would back up and back into the middle of Lindsay and Berry intersection. So they were one of the driving proponents around a right in, right out. That was a concession made, I think, maybe 2 or 3 iterations ago, but I just know the high-level stuff. So BJ, you.
Before you speak, something I just had a question on too, maybe you could address at the same time, and it may be more of a city question, is if anything was looked into as far as adding a right lane, a second right-hand lane that maybe would end at the end of this restaurant. That would have to be on city-owned land, but I'm just curious if that was looked into as a, almost a zipper merge lane, similar to what I think has happened at Penny Hill and that kind of area on the other end of the intersection at Berry. So.
Thank you for the questions. BJ Hawkins, Traffic Engineering Consultants. So the issue with the right in, right out, this site is obviously limited to the east-west, and so it's only so deep. Anytime you get a driveway that close to the intersection, you don't want to allow any left turns because that can easily back up into the intersection. And with the volume of traffic on Lindsay, it's 2.5, 3 times the traffic that's on Berry. So there's always going to be backups there, and there's not adequate right-of-way in that area to add a left turn lane into the site to be able to get them out of the through traffic. That's why they didn't take the widening, obviously, through, you know. So to prevent any sort of backups on Lindsay and that close to the intersection, a right in, right out is the easiest way to minimize all those traffic concerns. As far as a right turn lane, I assume you mean northbound on Berry turning into the site. The number of vehicles typically to require a right turn lane usually is around the 100 vehicles per hour. This entire site generates less than 50. Usually it's calculated about 40 per the peak hours, and that's entering and exiting. So it's going to have well below that. As far as right turns, typically those aren't the ones that are going to cause the delay because they're easily getting in. So the south, anything going northbound shouldn't have any sort of issue needing a right turn lane.
Thank you.
Any other comments, maybe specifically relating to the traffic item from commission? Or any other items for this? I was part of commission through a few iterations of this too. I believe Commissioner McDaniel was here for all of these as well, so this is the third time I've seen this. Some observations, and I went back, there was a version about October of 2021, and then before that, there was a version in about July of 2020. And each time, one thing that I will say to speak to the applicant, that they really took feedback that was given to them by us and by the neighbors and have really incorporated that in. I really appreciated that he made a point to meet with neighbors and to incorporate those points in the design. I think neighbors definitely still have concerns. They wouldn't be coming here speaking and making some of these names I've seen for a third time. So I know that these concerns are still going to exist, but I did want to just acknowledge working with the neighbors on there. I don't particularly love a site plan that has this much parking. I didn't particularly 100% love the last site plan that we actually approved at Planning Commission, but was declined at City Council either. One of the concerns that had been brought up previously in the strip center, because it was previously a strip center design, was really having to do with vacancies of retail space and things of that nature. And I think they've significantly changed their plan. What I liked, the fact that they put that 5,000 square foot max, and something we didn't really talk about, but the building they're actually proposing was only 4,200, but that they put that building max in there too. Really kind of trying to address many of the concerns. So some of the concerns I didn't hear neighbors speak on today, I heard them speak before, and I saw some of those alleviated through this plan design. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I want to encourage more applicants to make these outreaches to neighbors and work with them to help make a project that is good for everybody. So. Any other discussion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
In a vote?
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-0.
Moving to our next items, items number, I'll give you just a second. Items number 8, 9, and 10. Item number 8, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement. Number R-2324-43, G2S OK Investments LLC requests amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from low-density residential designation to commercial designation for approximately 5 acres of property located at 3800 36th Avenue Northwest. Consideration of approval, item number 9, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-13, G2SOK Investments LLC, requests rezoning from A2 Rural Agricultural District to PUD, Planned Unit, PUD, Planned Unit Development for approximately 5 acres of property located at 3800 36th Avenue Northwest. And item number 10, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of preliminary plat PP-2324-4, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by G2SOK Investments LLC, Crafton Toll, for 3800 36th Avenue Northwest for approximately 5 acres of property located at 3800 36th Avenue Northwest. The staff presentation.
Melissa Navarro with the Planning Department. We got an application from G2S OK Investments LLC for a 2025 land use and transportation plan amendment from low-density residential designation to commercial designation for the property located at 3800 36th Avenue Northwest. This is how the existing land use map look like. There's a residential all around the property except on the east, which is office and commercial. And this is how it's going to look with the proposal. The applicant is also asking to rezone from A2 Rural Agricultural District to PUD Plan Unit Development and consideration of a preliminary plat for 3800 36th Avenue Northwest. This is how the existing zoning looks like. The property is on A2 and the surrounding properties are R1 and PUD with commercial uses on the east. This is the existing land use. As you can see, residential all around, and this property on the east is vacant right now, but there's some commercial in the south by Tecumseh. This is an aerial of the property. This one is a perspective looking north. And this one is a perspective as well looking west. You can see the property side over here. This is the front of the property. There is only one house right now. This is 36th Avenue Northwest looking north. And this one is looking south. The property is right next to Castle Rock neighborhood. This is the preliminary plat. And this one is the site plan, the site development plan, but the applicant is here and he's going to go further in details with the proposed plan in a few minutes. The purpose for this rezoning request is to allow the development of a self-storage facility. The project also includes other residential uses listed in the PUD narrative that will be allowed with a site plan amendment only. The subject property is currently and has historically been residential. The new commercial use will increase traffic in the area when compared to the traffic generated by the historical use of the site, one single-family home. The tenants of the facility will utilize the site at varied times during business hours, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. However, typically the units for this type of facility are not visited on daily or even weekly basis. We have received protest letters from the neighbors that represent 12.1% of the protests within the notification area. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for staff?
The applicant is here if you...
Okay, moving to applicant presentation.
Question. Will there be outside storage allowed in the facility, or is it all going to be enclosed in the storage units?
Indoors, like there's no...
There won't be
outside, no.
RVs or boats? Or
No, just indoors.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we would take the applicant's presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Gunnar Joyce again with the Rieger Law Group. And on this one, we have Crafton Toll. Jason Spencer is the civil engineer on the project. And then we also with Storage Oklahoma and G2SOK. We have Brian Stanbeck and Dean Anderson. So they are the developer builders of this project. Here's the location, just to call out a couple of kind of the major players in the area. Norman Regional's HealthPlex campus is located just to the southeast here. We have Fowler Toyota and Bob Moore Nissan. They're on the east part of this kind of northeast section, is all zoned a PUD that was part of the Norman Regional HealthPlex PUD. Basically, this whole area was rezoned back when the HealthPlex was kind of in early conception phases. And so everything north up here is commercial allowances. This piece is agricultural A2, but the actual use of it is the Norman Fire Station, and then we have the All Saints Catholic School, St. Mark's just south of the site. So the location there, zooming in on the site, you can see our 5-acre tract right up against the Norman Fire Station, surrounded by the residences of the neighborhood, just north of this intersection. And again, you've already seen this from Melissa, but there's a zoomed in of the site. So the zoning in 2025, the zoning proposal here is PUD. 5 acres is the limitation, the cutoff point between SPUD and PUD. So basically, we're just on the cusp there of a PUD. So we will look just like the pink that you see kind of throughout this vicinity. And then the 2025, we're going to commercial. But this PUD, very similar to the last one we talked about, only, again, adds one additional use from what's allowed today. So we've kept the allowable uses that exist under the current zoning and added just outdoor storage, storage facility, not outdoor. You got my mind going there. So all indoor storage. So here's what the site will look like. And to give you kind of some background in the progress of this project, Brian and Dean, before we even had pre-development, hosted a town hall with the neighborhood to give them notice that this was coming and to hear them out. At the initial stage, the plan was a 2-story building in the middle, and that would have a second story of fully leasable, fully rentable storage. Based on that meeting and then the following pre-development meeting, they made the concession to get rid of 2-story and just have 1 story on the site. So again, everything on this site is capped at a single story, which is a downgrade from the existing A2 allowance where you could go up multiple stories. All the residences around it in R1, again, could build up to 2 stories. So this is less intense in height than what exists today, both in the neighborhood and on the site. There is, as you can see, the office building right there on 36 frontage is drafted into the PUD that it basically can have architectural elements that make it appear larger, but it is not a second usable story. So it's drafted in the PUD, that cannot be a usable story, and it is in fact less than 20 feet. I'll kind of go through the images and we'll get into the details, and as we talk, I'll give you some of the concessions. The PUD drafts in a whole bunch of requirements that could not be changed if this ever changed hands, could not be changed if the applicant wanted to change color schemes. We have drafted in that earth tones have to be the main color scheme of the site for all the exterior masonry and for the roof. We've drafted in substantial landscape buffers. We've drafted in height requirements. This is a very restrictive PUD, and we'll get into the details there as we kind of go through some of the visuals. This is fully gated. It also has hours of operation, so it's not a 24/7 site. The hours of operations and the gates are, again, drafted into the narrative, not just shown visually. Security of the site features security cameras, laser sensors, so even though it's not 24/7, it will remain secure through gates and security devices on site. Another one of the really impressive things this developer has done is got out in front of, even before the town hall, in their design of the site, they were very conscious of sight lines of the neighboring residential property owners. And so this shows the proposed 2-story building. And again, I'll probably keep reiterating this throughout the presentation, but this is another aspect that is enumerated into the PUD. All of the exterior storage buildings have to have residential in nature pitched roofs. So you can see on there 412 roof pitch. So it will not be your normal standard commercial building where you just have your metal box, your square roofs. These will have residential roof pitches so that it'll appear from the neighborhood to be like you're just looking at a house like all the neighbors to your other north, south, east. The plan with those roof pitches was that the two-story building would not be visible from basically 40 feet into the residential backyard for an average 6-foot person. Basically, as you get closer, you see less, and most of the neighbors' houses are an average of 40 feet from the property line. And so this design at the town hall meeting, even before pre-development, before filing, was thoughtful in that they wanted to ensure there was no imposing multi-story storage facility looking into these backyards. So that was the case with the initial filing. Since then, we've stepped it down from 2-story to 1-story, but the roof pitches are still drafted in. So all those exterior buildings still have to have the same roof pitches, but as you can see, those sight lines are going to go way up above, and you will not visualize and be able to visually see the single story in the interior of the site. So although we've dropped it down from 2 stories, and the whole purpose of the roof pitch and the sight line was because of the 2 stories, we've kept all that in. So I know that's a lot to follow there, but essentially the goal is to keep this feeling residential in nature. And we've drafted the roof pitches, we've drafted a number of other different aspects into this. And here is visually what we expect to see as 3D rendering, but you can see the roof pitches from what would be the neighboring property with, and this was an additional change, gables throughout to kind of make it look like residential architectural gables and not just one consistent pitched roof down the side. So difficult to see here, but what this shows is that roof pitch as you move down, the masonry look, and also the substantial landscape buffer. We get to the site plan here, and you will see all the green surrounding it is the landscape buffer. Now, it looks like it's a small sliver because it's a 5-acre site, but the landscaping requirement is 20 feet on the south, 20 feet on the west, 19 feet on the north. And that is, 2 regulation-sized basketball goals if you lay them down on the south and on the west. 19, so a 10 and a 9 foot on the north, and that's a very small difference. I know the difference to, regulation 10, I can jump and hang on it. A 9 foot, I can actually dunk it. So it's very small, but small difference. I thought that was funny. No one? I can dunk. All right, detailed PUD narrative. All this is drafted into the PUD. Again, only one allowable use from what exists today. Specific residential style roof pitches are drafted in. Specific color scheme with the earth tone is drafted in. A single story maximum height throughout the entire site. The landscape buffer of 20 feet and 19 feet. Hours of operation. The detailed landscape plan, which we'll get into in a second. Masonry requirement for everywhere that's basically visible from 36th, and also the masonry requirement backing up where the residential neighbors would see the backs of these buildings. Climate control equipment. So the interior buildings are going to be climate controlled, AC cooled. It is drafted into the PUD that there can be no climate control equipment on the roof. So just to make sure that sightline stays protected, you can't have AC units up on top of the roof. They'll be on the ground on the interior of the site. The developer will take over maintenance of any exterior fence. If there was a gap, that's on the developer to fix, but the existing fences will now become the developer's obligation to maintain. And there's a private sanitation solution. I think this is impressive. There is no dumpster on site. So no resident has to be worried about having the dumpster near their backyard. You don't want the smell and nuisance that can bring, and so there is no dumpster on site. They will privately maintain the trash. The landscape plan, they have done this in multiple locations across Norman and Oklahoma City, and so they have experience on the types of trees and shrubs that can thrive in the climate. These have drafted in types now that they expect to thrive: Chinese pistache, lacebark elm. You can see the numbers there: 36 Arizona cypress, 17 loblolly pine, 15 of the Chinese pistache, 24 elm, 58 shrubs, and 23,805 square feet of sod. So a substantial landscape plan, but even above that commitment, it's drafted into the PUD that this developer will consult with the Norman City Forester to ensure that the Forester agrees these locations and these species types can thrive here and take his recommendations into account as well. So the numbers there, the square footage is a requirement. The species might change depending on if the city forester believes there's a better species. Again, commercial outdoor lighting standard has been drafted in here. That's in the city's code. Again, no light spillover. We just talked about this photometric plan, and there is no, mounted pole lights shining up. There's no interior pole lights, so that is kind of what you could expect at night, just the interior architectural lighting with no spillover. And again, that's something that gets confirmed at final build stage with a photometric plan. So it's great to see it in 3D rendering. It's great for me to just stand up and tell you, but this is a developer, this is a company that actually does this in the marketplace. They have taken some of these neighbors on field trips to other sites, to other locations, and this is something that they do, really kind of changing the face of storage, especially abutting residential in the industry. This is not your typical metal siding, aluminum siding, neon yellow, neon green storage facility. This is residential in nature. It's something they do. It's something they do well. Again, another location. So the second item, another one here will be the preliminary plat that you vote on. The preliminary plat is where you kind of get into the nuts and bolts of traffic, of drainage, and the actual subdivision. There's no real change to the lot. It'll stay one lot. But this is, to their credit, one of the most impressive drainage solutions that I've been able to present to you. This is a very over-engineered drainage solution. Crafton Tall and Jason Spencer have worked very well with the neighbors on this. So the neighbors have had peer review of this study in correspondence with Jason throughout. And this comes from his plan. This is a lot of information, but I'm going to do my best to summarize it. As you can see over here, and as we've talked before, there are storm frequencies, a storm that you experience every 2 years, all the way up to every 100 years. And what you have to do, as we've talked before, is you have to show that your development is going to release water at the historic rate that is what exists today. What exists today is a single-family house. It's mostly green space, open space. So this developer has to have an engineered solution on site that makes their development with a lot of impervious and concrete release and drain at that same historic rate. So let's look at the numbers here, and then I'll show you where they're doing it on the site. But the historic release rate for a 2-year storm is 19.89 cubic feet per second. They are doing detention ponds on the east side that'll detain water here, and the proposed development release rate through those detention ponds will be 11.88 cubic feet per second. So as you can see, this development is actually going to improve the drainage conditions that exist today. That is because there is no detention, there is no pond, there is no engineered solution. It just sheet flows straight from the northwest to the southeast. This is going to control it, maintain it, and release it at a steady rate. The detention volume that would be required in order to meet the city's ordinances would be 0.53 acres per foot. I believe that's acre. Is that acre? Acre feet. I just knew I shouldn't get this detailed. Anyway, the detention volume required 0.53 acre feet. What is being provided through their engineering plan is 1.647 acre feet. So again, a substantial increase. And really, when you look at the storms we are most likely to experience, we're most likely to experience 2-year storm frequencies, right? The 100-year happens once every 100 years. This happens once every 2 years. So this drastic improvement, this over-engineered solution is something that you'll see more frequently than what you do the 100-year. But even at the 100-year, and I won't bore you with the same discussion there, but again, we are well in excess of what would be required. 60 to 38, 1.27, 1.64. So it is a substantially over-engineered drainage solution. This comes from the drainage report. The drainage detention system provides significantly more volume than required and significantly reduces the post-development discharge rate to be well below the pre-development value. So after development, after the installation of these drainage solutions, it will improve the area, the drainage characteristics, and be substantially better than historical. Traffic analysis. There was also, Crafton Tall did a traffic memo on this. A full TIA was not required, just like BJ Hawkins just said on the other one. There was not anywhere near the threshold to trigger a TIA, so they've done just a memo. City has reviewed that memo, recommends approval. Just to get a little nuanced here, we also looked at compliance with Norman's engineering design criteria manual. We haven't got to talk about that yet since the update in February. So we have a new EDC that was passed in February. This proposed driveway complies with both the EDC requirement for spacing for driveways along arterial roadways and spacing from a controlled intersection. Basically, you have to be 220 feet from a driveway. We are 316 feet from the north residential Brownwood. We are 337 from Buckingham to the south. And the EDC distancing from the controlled intersection requires 175 from controlled. We are over 1,000 feet from 36 and Tecumseh, which is the closest controlled intersection. City staff's traffic review. This is city staff's report, comes straight from there. Traffic capacities exceed demand in the area. No negative traffic impacts are anticipated. Recommendation of approval. Again, I touched on it, but the neighborhood outreach of this developer has been very impressive. I'll go through it quickly. Prior to the pre-development meeting, there was a town hall. Then there was a pre-development meeting. And then after that, they had continuous discussions, dialogues, meetings, field trips, correspondence with many of the property owners. The developer took several residents to those other locations I showed you, direct contact and peer review of that drainage study, and revised the site plan in response to feedback, taking it from 2 stories down to 1. So in summary, it's an amendment of the comp plan to commercial, although again, just like the last one, it is not a full commercial PUD. It is one allowable use that's commercial. It is this project. It's approval of a PUD to facilitate this development. It's approval of the preliminary plat again to facilitate this development. And it is a substantial PUD that drafts in a lot of protections to the neighbors. Residential roof pitch, specific color scheme, hours of operation, single story throughout the site, substantial landscape, 20 feet, 19 feet, no dumpster on site, and other specific items in there. It's a longer PUD. You have it in your packet. And in my opinion, the most impressive aspect is the over-engineered drainage solution. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any commission questions for the applicant?
I have one. Given the extent and the investment in landscaping, I'm going to presume that's irrigated, so it's going to stay as pretty as this rendering is.
That's correct.
Good. The other thing I have, I appreciate the fact that there's a brick facade on all the buildings at front 36, except the one building on the north. And you can see that as you approach from the south. I'd like to see that actually, any building that you can see from 36th Avenue to have a brick facade. The fact that the storage that runs along the fence for the neighborhood, those are, you see a brick veneer, and that's wonderful. I think that's, aesthetically, this is a very pleasing development, but I really, that one building on the north, you brick that, and I won't have any angst about this at all.
I do think, and I do definitely hear that comment because you can see it from this as well, but I think you see more of it from the elevated kind of drone shot there than you would driving on 36, because there's a building in front here that's also brick facade. That's that second tier back there. So that photo I was showing you, you won't see that much of it on either side when you're actually driving in a car at street level.
I appreciate that, but you will see it. So just from an aesthetic perspective and having to deal with a storage facility when I was on council, that the developer did some nice things at my recommendation. This would be the only thing I would recommend.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant by commission? Okay. Seeing none, move to audience comments. If you have not already filled out a card, there are cards on the cart on the back. I'm going to call Peggy Cook up first. Just as a reminder, 3 minutes to speak. If you want a 30-second warning before the time's up, let me know. Otherwise, I'll leave the full time for you. And if you will just start by saying your name and address, please.
Thank you. I'm Peggy Cook, 4005 Stonehurst Street in Norman. I represent the board of the Castle Rock Homeowners Association, and we stand in opposition to this. here's some of what has happened with this surprising development once the owner of this land decided it was time to sell. So this land had long been a 5-acre lot of agricultural land with lots of stories about why that was, and lots of tales that neighbors told each other about why this land had not been developed. But now, evidently, it is time to move forward and make a change in this land. So Mr. Stanback met with us. He let the neighborhood know that he was going to have a pre-development meeting. He listened to us. The board has met and gone on record as opposing the project for many of the reasons that you hear tonight, that due to lighting, due to increased hubbub in the neighborhood, of bringing in a facility that would be seen by the neighbors, and bringing in a commercial property that was completely surrounded on 3 sides by a residential neighborhood. The board created a petition stating the most noted issues and held neighborhood meetings, and you can see the report from staff on the response from the neighbors to the petition. And although I did receive an additional 2 or 3 names tonight that I've submitted to go forward to the council. This property, we were very concerned with the water flow and with the excess, because there are problems with storm drainage in the neighborhood, and you've heard extensive comments from the developer about his work to do that. The HOA board members are really charged to be the representatives for the best interest of the neighborhood. And despite how truly pleasant and cooperative Mr. Stanback has been throughout this process, and he has worked to listen to us, and just last Friday, he held a meeting with the board to go over these changes. This property does remain a storage unit rental business. When adjacent neighbors need to sell their homes, the presence of this facility in their backyard will most likely result in reduced property values and probably greater resistance from potential buyers when they're trying to sell the property. The developer will realize a financial stream from this project, while the board sees that our neighbors will have a financial burden for this property being built in this area. The board is also concerned that in the unlikely event, for some reason, that this applicant abandons the project, what will happen? Is the PUD sufficient to continue a commercial property that's of the same level with this? We don't expect this to happen from what we've been told, but what would be done to prevent that from happening? So we thank you for listening to the comments. We appreciate the opportunity to come and make comment and to protest this.
Thank you very much. I have Daphne Summers.
Hello, I'm Daphne Summers, 3701 Buckingham Drive. We back up to the property. It's been vacant for over 15 years. Ray moved to New York, and it's been filled with ragweed and overgrown for a very long time. I was really concerned when I heard that it was going to be storage facilities, because I have an idea in my mind what a storage facility looks like. And we took the time to go and look at some of Brian's properties, and were really surprised and shocked by how nice they looked. As it stands right now, we really don't feel like we can sell our property because the land is in limbo. And we also don't feel like we want to really invest in our property because that land behind us is in limbo. And if this was developed into duplexes, that would severely impact our property. Even if it was a funeral home or a park, we would lose our privacy. What he has proposed is aesthetically pleasing. It maintains our privacy for the people who back up to that property are used to not having people looking in their backyards, and we've been there a long time. And this maintains our privacy. It's quiet, it's secure, and it's aesthetically pleasing. I did want to address the petition from the HOA. It had incorrect information in there. It said that the buildings would be 2-story, and they're 1-story. Brian and his team has worked really hard to communicate with neighbors to include, incorporate all our concerns. The 2-story was a concern. He took care of that. So I just wanted to say that it would really bring a lot of peace of mind to have this developed by somebody who has actually taken the time to address our drainage concerns, does a nice job, and we could move forward with our lives. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any other Planning Commission discussion? None? Okay. I appreciated the comment about the facade. I had noticed that from the aerial as well and asked that question earlier of the applicant before. I also had a lot of the same concerns when I heard storage facility here. I had questions about what else this lot could have been used for, and I did meet with the applicant party beforehand to ask some questions, including feasibility for this as residential, because the very first thing I think that comes in mind, even when you're looking at the 2025 plan, was residential uses. Without over-disclosing, anything that, as far as what they have sales prices, I don't know what part of that might be private or affect their transaction. It did not seem that anything affordable could be used into residential lots here, but that was something that I did inquire of the applicant on, so I just wanted to mention that. I had a lot of concerns about storage facilities. I did look at some of the images of the other ones, and I was surprised because I think I also, just mimicking, had a very preconceived idea of what I expected a storage facility would look like. Even some of the questions I had initially about like the roof line, what you see, and the sight lines, and I appreciated a sight line being in the PUD, which is not very common, and protecting some of the views. I know those have come up from other neighbors on other projects, and that's not always in a PUD initiative. So just wanted to appreciate that. And as I mentioned on the other applicant, really appreciate when an applicant is meeting with neighbors, addressing neighbor concerns. I know there was a stormwater engineer that lived in this neighborhood that was able to give feedback to their stormwater engineer, and that type of partnership is really valuable. So I just wanted to commend the applicant for actually talking to the neighbors. Again, there are still neighbor concerns that we definitely need to hear, but I just appreciate that. So I don't know if there's any other commission items, but wanted to mention some of those notes I had.
I just have a little comment here as well. I think the rendition here is beautiful. I think that the idea is great, but I agree with my fellow commissioner. If the front buildings are brick facade, the main building is brick facade, even though you might barely see it, I think that aesthetically, that making that north building a brick facade would basically finish out the entire project. As far as what the lady said with the property sitting there for 15 years and now it's all grown up and everything, thank you for somebody cleaning it up. That's all I have.
Commissioner McClure, if I may, we're happy to take that as a recommendation tonight on the vote on the masonry of that building. I did fail to mention that that is going to be textured metal, so the city's ordinances actually allow textured metal to be considered masonry, but something you can't pick up on this is the texture and the paint that would be put on there, but happy to have that be a recommendation tonight on the brick masonry.
Right, thank you.
So to that effect, just as a point of order, when we make a motion, you can make a motion to approve with a recommendation as part of the motion that would go forward as our recommendation to City Council. So just reminding commissioners of that.
I make a motion to approve with the recommendation that that northern building have masonry on the front as well.
I second it.
And a vote?
You may vote.
Thanks.
Everyone has, motion carried 6-0.
Just as a point of order for commissioners, does anybody need a break, or would you like to proceed to our next item? Move forward. Okay, going forward. Moving on to items 11, 12, and 13. Item number 11, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, or postponement of resolution number R-2324-11. Alliance Development Group LLC requests amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from future urban service area to current urban service area, and from medium-density residential designation to mixed-use designation, and removal of Special Planning Area 5 for 60.4801 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of 36th Avenue Northwest and Franklin Road. Item number 12, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-1. Alliance Development Group LLC requests rezoning from A2 Rural Agricultural District to PUD Planned Unit Development for 60.4801 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of 36th Avenue Northwest and Franklin Road. And item number 13, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of preliminary plat PP-2324-5, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Raven Investments LLC, SMC Consulting Engineers PC, for Franklin Woods, a planned unit development for 60.4801 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of 36th Avenue Northwest and Franklin Road. And I'll take the staff presentation.
It's a long one. Okay, we have an application from Alliance Development Group LLC for a 2025 land use plan amendment. So they kind of have three requests for a 2025 amendment. One from future to current urban service area, one from medium density residential to mixed use, and to remove from special planning area 5. This map is kind of hard to tell exactly what the lot is, but here's the 2025 as it is now with the three of those things. And then the purple is the subject tract. So changing it to mixed use, taking it out of special planning area 5 and into current urban service area. And then they're also requesting rezoning from A2 to PUD and a consideration of a preliminary plat. It is currently all zoned A2. And the J&J, I always want to say Johnson & Johnson. It's not. It's J&J PUD and plat to the west in the pink. Ruby Grant Park to the south. The PUD that's on the east side is the Battison automobile sales and garage proposal. They haven't brought anything forward for building permit yet. And then to the north is Crystal Springs. The lot is subject tract is currently vacant except for an oil well. So here's the aerial of the property as it is now. It's just a different view. So you can see Ruby Grant here on the bottom of the picture. So this is looking south on 36th. Looking south on Interstate Drive, looking north. Then here's the intersection of Franklin and 36th. Then looking west on Franklin. All right, here we have the preliminary plat. So on the south of the property, they're proposing multifamily, then single family on the northwest, and then there's some commercial along Interstate Drive on the east. Here's a green space exhibit, site development plan. And then we do have 17.4% protest within the notification area. And the applicant is here at the presentation, and I'm available for questions as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff by commission? Do you know the speed limit right there on the intersection for 36th and Franklin? Is it 50 miles per hour on both streets?
40.
40, okay.
Yeah.
40, okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, we'll take the applicant presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners. Gunnar Joyce, Rieger Law Group. On this one, we've got Richard McCown with Alliance Development Group. He'll be the development entity on this project. We also have Chris Anderson with SMC, he's the civil engineer of the project, and BJ Hawkins still hanging out with TEC. This is the location of the site, and really what we'll talk about a lot tonight is Ruby Grant Park. It is right there to the south, as you see the Norman City logo there. It really, one, it drives the current planning of this property, and it also drives the proposal of this site. We are at the northeast corner of Franklin and 36th. You can see up here Indian Hills Road, I-35, and then our site here, we'll get a little closer in here. There's Ruby Grant Park, there's the neighborhood to the north. This is the Bridge View at Carrington PUD, which proposes a substantial mixed-use development with single-family residential houses close to the R1 type of development. This also up here is R1 development. This down here is R1 development, and one of the things we are going to propose tonight on the north end is R1 development, single-family housing, so something that is frequent in the area. The current zoning is A2 rural agricultural, but I think it is important to note again the location of where we are. We have I-35 frontage on this, and we have development, substantial approved development and substantial built-out development to the west of this site. So it is not a rural agricultural site. The proposal here is a PUD for mixed use with single-family residential R1, similar to, again, what you'll see on this side of 36th Avenue. I-35 frontage will have commercial uses, just like the Battison PUD that is approved, and then apartment complex down here to utilize Ruby Grant Park. The 2025 current comp plan for this entire site is medium density residential, and that is the SPA, Special Planning Area 5, is essentially to protect this area of development so that it did build out at medium density, dense residential to utilize the planned park space. And that is exactly what we are here tonight to propose, is a density increase where we can utilize significant public investment in Ruby Grant Park. It's something that we'll talk about in detail. Again, the 2025 right now is medium density residential. What that means is that is currently planned to go to RM2 low density apartment district. That's medium density residential. The allowances with the city's RM2 district are two-family dwelling duplexes, and also apartment buildings containing 4 or fewer units. That's, again, this entire site. So our proposal is less dense up here along the north to be a buffer to this residential community with R1. That's a step down from R2, RM2. And then we're going to make up with that density, because it's important to note this community has always said that's an area prime for density. We're going to make up that density with a more dense apartment complex down here, away from the neighborhood, and to, again, utilize Ruby Grant, which was the plan all along with SPA 5 that was passed in 2004 with the Norman 2025 plan. Here is the preliminary site plan in detail. You've got the residential R1 size lots, a standard run-of-the-mill R1 6,000 square foot lots. It is not tiny lots, small lots. It's R1 designation. This over here on the frontage, which is separated from the single-family residential by a detention pond, so completely separated there, is going to be commercial, light industrial office use to really utilize that I-35 frontage and to be a good buffer neighbor with the approved Battison dealership. That'll be right there. Not part of the project, but that's the approved site plan for Battison. And then a substantial green space that's floodplain that'll remain undisturbed throughout the center of the site. And then you've got the 350 apartment complex, 350 apartments down here. Again, buffered away from I-35, buffered away from the residents both within this mixed-use development through the open space and also the existing to the north of this property, and really utilizing what has always been planned by Norman to be a dense area for this community park. It is worth noting that it is a substantial commitment to open space. It is over 27 acres of this development will be preserved as open space. That is roughly 45% of the whole site. We usually talk about open space on mixed-use developments in the 10, 15, 20%. This is 45% of the entire site as dedicated green space, open space. And with that, I'm going to pull up Richard McCown, the developer, because it would be a disservice if I was the one to talk through the plan of the apartments.
Thank you, Gunnar. Richard McCowan, 4409 Cannon Drive, which isn't very far from here. I live in the Carrington Place community, Carrington Lakes, and we've been over here developing in this quadrant of Norman for the last 25 years. And we're really excited about this particular apartment community. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about apartments. I love apartments. We've built 357 apartments that we own and operate in downtown Oklahoma City. And I'm gonna talk a bit about apartments. Apartments today are these are high-end luxury apartment communities, and this one is exactly that. You'll see with the picture in front of you, every single apartment has this outdoor amenity space with a balcony. These buildings look the same, more or less, from the front and the back, meaning they have all those nice balconies, which will be looking out over the park. And the reason those things are really important, especially on the ground floor, is you just step right out into the park space. And you'll see from the site plan, lots of these apartments walk right out onto the green space and an open space. And of course, we'll be building an elaborate network of trails that will go to the amenities that are built into these communities. Gunnar, I don't know how to run this thing and go backwards. Can we go back a slide?
Yeah, right.
Maybe two. There we go. Okay. So you'll see lots of the apartments, well, all of them actually, either face the park or back up to our open space that is compromised both of detention ponds as well as the wildlife corridor that is the floodplain. I want to point your attention out to there's a green rectangle sort of tilted. That's 300 by 150 feet, roughly the size of a football field. That oil well will be plugged before we ever build this. We can't build this community with that oil well there. And that space has been leveled and flattened. And of course, it's a requirement of the city of Norman that we come back through and anything we want to build, that area is in the floodplain, but anything we would build in there in the way of pickleball courts or sports facilities, dog park, things of that nature, we wouldn't remove any of the capacity of the floodplain to do its job. But developing in there to this series of amenities and trails, we're currently not showing them on this plan, but as we come through with the final plans for construction, we'll be going back through the floodplain committee to add all those details in and make them part of our building permit. So apartments today, this is a 350 unit community. You need that number of apartment units to be able to put a 5-person staff on site, 2 maintenance people full-time, full-time on-site manager, and a couple of leasing agents. And that level of staffing is how you keep these the concierge level of service that we provide in our downtown Oklahoma City apartments. We're currently building a community almost identical to this in Edmond right now. It's been gone through flying colors in Edmond, and they haven't built a new apartment community in Edmond in over a decade. It's really exciting. They know our history. They know the kind of development we do. Catty corner across the street in the Carrington communities, we've built 8.4 miles of walking trail in that small 270-acre neighborhood. So that said, another aspect of this apartment community that's important there's multiple different ways to be in the apartment business. You can build them, lease them up, and sell them. That's called being a merchant builder. That's not who we are, and that's not who our capital partners are. We build these communities to never sell them. We think this is an incredible site in Norman, right here across from Ruby Grant Park, and it really doesn't lend itself to very much else. It doesn't want to be a quick trip or other kind of commercial use. It needs to be a residential use, but it needs to have enough density to provide some real activity in the park. And along those lines, parks become really vibrant, special places when they're busy all the time, when they're busy from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And Jane Jacobs, the author of the amazing book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, tells this very specific story about 4 parks in Philadelphia. They're all equidistant away from City Hall. They're very old parks that Benjamin Franklin had a hand in putting there. One of the parks is over by the highway, because the highway came later after Benjamin Franklin, and that park doesn't work very well. No one goes to it, and to use the language of Jane Jacobs, it's where the bums hang out. There's another park that's completely surrounded by office buildings. That park also is not unsafe, because only office workers come and go, and you don't have residents utilizing the park throughout the day. There's another park that's in a residential-only district. That park also doesn't function well and has, again, her 1966 language of hobos hanging out, and it makes it intimidating for the moms of small children to go utilize the park. But Renton House Square, the one park that's surrounded by lots of apartments, lots of restaurants, lots of office space, is busy all the time. And Jane walks us through at 7 a.m., the workers cutting across the park to get to leaving their apartments to head to the office. And then at 8 a.m., the moms coming out and getting the kids to school. And then at 9, you've got the retired guys coming in and sitting in the coffee shops. Where I'm going with this, and she walks us all the way through to late night with, the young single folks going on dates, having a stroll in the park. That park's always safe, and it's been safe now for a couple of 100 years because of that mixture of uses. So Gunnar mentioned the Bridgeview at Carrington PUD that you're actually going to see next month, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be here. I'm going to go see my kid who's studying abroad. Will not be here when he's going to talk about this, but it's got a commercial proposal directly across the street to the west, and then we own 10 acres catty corner to this, south and west, that's zoned commercial. Why haven't we developed it yet? There's a lot of reasons. There isn't the residential density to be able to bring those neighborhood services to this location. Franklin Road is never going to go across and have a bridge across I-35. If you look at it in one of the aerial views, that's a very complex intersection with Highway 77 coming off ODOT. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't even line up as you go over to Highway 77 or Flood Avenue. So it's always going to be this quiet street, and it makes this commercial intersection really hard to ripen in order to bring the kind of neighborhood retail services that actually make a place a great place and make a park like this the place you want to meet your friends for coffee and go for a walk, or meet them for an evening meal and go for a walk, or just get some exercise over lunch. We definitely think that the development here at the commercial will begin to ripen significantly as we have the residents here to stimulate that and become the customer base for that kind of retail activity. Let me see, a few other things I want to talk about. So, as many of you may know, I'm actually an official voting member of the AIM Norman Comprehensive Land Use Plan that I think you all were just at an update. I was there last night sitting around the table, and we're going over what we're going to be doing for the next 12 months, updating our comprehensive land use plan. I was here and worked and didn't miss a meeting of the 2004 comp plan, which is the current comp plan we're working on. And I was here I'm an official voting member for the 2017 comp plan that we didn't adopt. So I've got a lot of history with our comp plan, and I've been working on this diligently. And I've been studying the numbers. Where we're at currently, Norman built 417 houses last year, single-family detached houses. That's one of the lowest numbers Norman's built in the last decade. Norman historically builds about 500 houses a year, and you can look at that through the Dharma Builders Report over the last 20 years. This year, we're on track to build even fewer homes. So recently, I pulled up and looked at all the available land in our comp plan that would allow us to build single-family detached homes like what is proposed on the north portion of this. That's only 47 home sites. We have room. Okay, let me back up. We're growing at a 1.67% growth rate. 20 years ago, we were growing at a 2% growth rate. So we're at a declining growth rate, but if you just project that growth rate forward, then over the next 17 years, bringing us to 2040, we have to add 19,000 more housing units. 19,000 more housing units sounds like a lot, but it's really not that many in the big scheme of the whole Oklahoma City metro. But if you look at the available land we have to build single-family detached homes, we're only going to be able to accommodate 4,700 single-family housing units, 4,700 of the 19,000. Well, we're probably going to open up some more land. There's a really good chance that we'll do our job over the next 12 months and we'll come back with a comp plan that at least gets us to a ratio of the kind of 60-40, because 40%, something we learned this past year working on the One Norman vision, is 40% of the residents in Norman are renters. So we do have parts in Norman that have lots of apartments. We have some really great apartments in Norman. This is going to be one of the coolest apartment communities in Norman, and certainly one of the most luxury. And we need more affordable apartments, but that's not this. And it will certainly open up, take pressure off other older buildings elsewhere in the city. But let me come back to this idea that on that 60, if you just take the 417 housing units, single family, and project that forward over the next 17 years, that's 7,088 housing units we're going to build of the 19,000 needed. So there's 11,000 housing units short. That equals 39 300-unit apartment complexes. 39 300-unit apartment complexes that Norman needs over the next 17 years. So recently I've been working on the map, on like the comp plan map. Where are we going? How are we going to accommodate this growth? And we're even talking about accelerated growth because we're joining the SEC. I'm not so sure I believe that's going to happen. We don't have anywhere to grow. I found 14 places, including this one, where we can build 300-unit apartment complexes. 3 of them are already in the J&J PUD that we're updating and renaming to the Bridgeview at Carrington. We got nowhere to open up and build more apartments. It's really imperative that we build for someone besides Ward and June Cleaver. In other words, the married couple with the 2.3 children living at home. That's what the single-family market's all about. 27% of the households of America are one-occupant household. 27%, it's the largest demographic. Married couples with school-age children living at home is only 19% of people, households in America. We aren't building for single people, and we're really excited to be designing apartment communities that are created for the successfully single. 50.2% of adults in America are not married. Just slightly more than half of the American adult population is single or unmarried. Who's building for them? They're great people. In order to live here, your rent payment is higher than lots of house payments. Another feature that's in this, we have private garages. Those add to the luxury of it. It's got a clubhouse that's definitely designed to be a family living room, big swimming pool. It's a gated community. The main entry is off of Franklin Road across from Ruby Grant Park. The coming and going will be at that primary entry off of Franklin Road. The other access off of 36th Avenue is for emergency services, but when people come and get their mail and come and go, they go in and out the front gate. That's just how we structure these things. So we're excited about this community. I could talk about it all day, obviously. We think it's going to be a really wonderful addition to not just Norman, but to our overall land use master plan. We're clearly deeply invested in here. The land group that we work with has 1,500 total acres, stretching from Indian Hills Road and I-35 all the way over to Pennsylvania and 149th Street in Oklahoma City. So we're only doing things that increase the total value of the property, enhance the neighborhood, make the commercial services more viable, because we know all those things make this a greater destination. And happy to answer any questions.
Real quick, I'll go through just a couple more of the details there that we will touch on. Richard mentions a whole bunch of great comments there that will be future issues, future discussions, is where do you put development, where do you grow? There'll be hard questions. Luckily tonight, this is not one. This has been planned for density. This has had a special planning area on it since 2004 that we want density here. And we have gone through the city process and had nothing but excitement at every step with the staff report, Greenbelt Commission, and Parks Board. And you see it on screen here. The staff report for this item says the use of apartments across from Ruby Grant Park is recommended to allow space for residents to have recreation activities. Current medium density residential designation implies the intent was to place multifamily developments in this area. Greenbelt was also excited and wanted to talk about the connectivity to Ruby Grant Park for this development and other developments in the vicinity. And the discussion at Greenbelt was, how do we safely walk these apartment residents to utilize Ruby Grant Park, to utilize these master plan trails? And Greenbelt recommended that parks consider having an extra trail to the intersection. At Parks Board, we were approved unanimously for fee in lieu of parkland donation, so that our site, that although it has amenities, has green space, does not have to have its own private park, doesn't have to dedicate a public park, obviously because of the location to Ruby Grant. But Parks Board also talked about taking that fee that'll be given to parks and looking at enhancing some of the trails so that we could really be an example of connectivity from this apartment complex down to the park. It's preliminary plat. I won't spend too much time because I think Richard nailed a whole bunch of stuff, but we'll just briefly go. Traffic, this one does, unlike the other two that we talked about, it does require a full TIA, which was done. You might not know, you might already, but a TIA looks at multiple traffic patterns. It looks at future background traffic, which has nothing to do with our development. It's everything that exists now. Future trips generated by other proposed or planned developments that don't exist today. So it considers the Bridgeview, it considers Redlands, which is on Indian Hills, it considers planned but not actually turned dirt projects. And then it considers, in addition, the traffic that is attributable to this proposed development. It also looks at, again, we just mentioned the updated EDC for compliance with EDC. That all was done. I won't spend too much time because it's a very hefty report. It's available. City staff reviewed it, recommended approval, and stated no negative traffic impacts are anticipated. Future traffic capacities in this area will exceed demand for the existing and proposed traffic. Here's the plan in context. And again, just to reiterate, this entire site has been planned since 2004 for medium density residential. So we are in a concession, an effort for protection of that residential development to the north, not proposing that medium density type, but instead a single family R1 like exists already in the vicinity up here as well, just to the north, and then Bridgeview, which is approved already. Bridgeview has R1 approved already. So just like what's in the surrounding area, I-35 again, that's going to be the commercial, That is a more appropriate use for I-35 frontage road, especially with the approval of Battison, and then kind of the crown jewel of the project, that fulfilling the special plan area, fulfilling the long-term stated goal of Norman to bring density to utilize this park and keep it safe, like Richard talked about. So there's a brief summary slide, but I think we've summarized it, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Hey, go ahead.
I was going to prompt any questions for the applicants.
Okay, yeah, I did have a question. I read through each one of the protest letters, and there was a lot of discussion about flooding concerns along Northwest 36th Street. Just wanted to see if you could, you were the applicant, could speak to that, so.
Yeah, I didn't get into as much detail as I did on the prior one, because the prior development was 5-acre site, right? So flooding and impervious space is way more substantial in a commercial development. And here we have 45% of the whole area remaining as open space. So as a start threshold, this is a very green, this is a very undisturbed natural development, especially more than what is proposed on the 2025 current comp plan. But again, all the things I mentioned previously still apply. So all of Norman's ordinances still apply, that you can't increase the flow, you got to match the historic flow. When they come forward with final plat of each basically individual site, so the R1, the commercial, and the apartments, they will have the same level of detail that we just talked about on the storage to show that their proposal with each plat can handle the storage of the runoff that each part will have before it's approved. So again, we will get to that level of detail at final plat stage. They have already gone through floodplain permit committee and got approval for the roadway that crosses through the floodplain. So they have already had to show development plans and compensatory storage for the piece that crosses there, and that has already been approved. So, you talking more on that? Yeah.
If I could, I'd like to ask Chris Anderson to come talk specifically about this, but in the original concept plan, the entry road for the single-family portion of this came straight out to the west. And Chris and I spent quite a bit of time thinking about what we could do to make sure that we didn't back up any water onto the neighbors to the north, or back any water up into the borrow ditch on 36th Avenue. And my job's to cause problems. Chris solves them. So I said, well, what about this curve? And I'm going to let him explain it.
Well, first of all, Chris Anderson with SMC Consulting Engineers. Would like to point out that nothing on this site drains north to the existing neighborhood. The entire site drains from the northwest down to the southeast through that existing creek that runs through there. There is a large drainage area on the west side that comes across 36 there. There are some older structures under the street there. I'm sure you're probably aware of the City of Norman is working on plans to improve 36. And I haven't seen the plans, but I would bet that they are doing something to increase those structures coming under 36. Now, as far as Gunnar said, before we could even come to the preliminary plat stage, because we are showing work in the floodplain area with that entry road coming off of 36, we had to apply for a floodplain activity permit. And to do that, even though, again, this is a preliminary plat stage, we had to do detailed plans of our entry road. And as Richard said, we pulled it back in order to provide an area up there where, as Gunnar mentioned, we're doing compensatory storage. So there's a certain amount of volume in that 100-year floodplain. We're putting in fill where we're doing the road. So to compensate for that, we're excavating out some areas to balance out that equation. And in this case, we're actually providing a net positive of the storage area in that floodplain. Again, we had to do a detailed plan and profile sheet of the road, plan and profile sheet of the drainage structure, a detailed grading plan, turn that in for staff for review, and then appear before the floodplain committee and they voted unanimously to approve and give us that floodplain activity permit. So, and again, as Gunnar said, we've got detention ponds on site when we do the final construction plans. And I've done this before with Richard, and sometimes he doesn't like it. If we get into the final plans and the plans, the size we've got shown are not big enough, I tell him, hey, we've got to make them a little bigger, you got to lose a lot or whatever, and that's the way we do it. So I think we've got everything taken care of on the drainage.
And I had an additional question. There's a lot of discussion about the recommendations from Parks Commission and other studies that have been done about the encouraging high-density development north of the park. And my biggest concern, and maybe this is potentially out of your hands, but just like it to be addressed and at least said publicly, is how we encourage and create that pedestrian connectivity between those apartments and that in the park in a safe way, because I do think that this is a really rare opportunity to provide an amazing amenity or connect an amazing amenity to a development that's going to have high pedestrian activity.
So Mark Nanny with the Greenbelt Commission brought this very same question up, and we've committed, and I don't want to speak for the Parks Department, but we covered this in our Parks Board review. And I walk this. I go on these 4 to 6 mile hikes with my brother, and this is one of our routes through the park. And then we're marching through the tall grass to get back onto Franklin Road to head back out to Red Sky Ranch, actually. And Parks just needs to build like a little spur up to the intersection, and we'll meet them. And we'll come with an 8-foot wide walking trail from that direction. And then we'll have another 8-foot wide walking trail come down and connect across the street from the pavilion that's and restroom facilities that's on the north end of Ruby Grant, about midway along that or half mile. We want to make it really easy for all the residents who live here to be able to come through the floodplain from the single-family side and get to Ruby Grant without having to go out over to 36th Street and down. And that's going to take some doing to get structures through the floodplain in the form of 8-foot wide walking trails, but we've done it, and we'll make that all part of our final plat process. But pedestrianism, making a suburban neighborhood walkable to where you can walk through the park to get to those future commercial spaces is really what we're all about. That's the primary feature that causes people to want to build a second or a third house in the neighborhoods we build. And anyway, I don't know if I've totally answered your question, but we're completely committed to building really wide, which will actually function as multimodal pedestrian pathways to safely get through the intersection of 36th and Franklin, as well as to cross Franklin Road at the pavilion at halfway, about a quarter mile to the west of the intersection.
I had just an anecdotal comment to make on that too, and that I've made before. It's kind of a commission item, but I actually lived at Quanah Parker Trail across from the Sutton Wilderness when I actually was single at the time. And I really enjoyed being able to walk over to Sutton Wilderness, and I did that regularly from a single-family home. But I did also jaywalk across the road, too. So that was one consideration I had on there about the traffic in there, too, and possibly having safe egress across the Franklin Road component on there, too. So very much enjoyed living next to a big wildlife park. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that's why a lot of people will want to move closer to, and have maybe chosen to already move close and live close to Ruby Grant Park. But yeah, that was one thought I had too. So, okay, seeing none, I'd like to go ahead and move to audience comments. I have Patrick Schrank. And I know you spoke before, but for this item, if you will please state your name and address one more time for me.
Thank you. Patrick Schrank, 1309 Rebecca Lane. I will start by saying there's a lot of ways that this site could have been developed. And I will say, I think that this is a really smart way to develop it. You know, the widening of 36 is going to really change the landscape of this area quite a bit. It's going to be a lot heavier traffic. If the turnpike comes to fruition, it's going to be a lot busier on this road, and that's really going to change this whole area. This is a good developer. This is a local developer. Oftentimes you don't see people who live in your community doing this type of large development. So I think that's very notable. This developer emphasized trails, green space, very important. The apartments could have been commercial. I think it would have made sense for commercial to be on that corner, just being that it's a major corner. And I applaud them for not doing that, because commercial right across from the park would have really been detrimental to the park. The use of the storm areas for green space, really applaud that. I think the ADUs are allowed in the single family, increasing density, another great idea. So I applaud this development.
Thank you. Any other audience comments? That's okay. Thank you. You'll just say your name and address to start.
So I'm Wes Hubert. I'm at 3300 Crystal Springs Drive. So I'm in the community directly north of this. And so something I'll hit on right off the bat is we know he's local. He lives in where I used to live in Carrington. I will also say that you've applauded these other builders for communicating with, you know, homeowners that are in direct, I guess, zoning of this. And the only verbal we've got from him was the meeting we had here previously. It was 30 minutes long, and 28.5 minutes of that was him talking. A lot of the exact same things he was talking about here. And I'll point out some of the things that haven't been mentioned that were mentioned in that meeting, so we can get some clarity on that. So for me, if I have a $450,000 to $500,000 home, and I'm the smallest home in the neighborhood, on 2-acre lot, surrounded by all these other residential areas that are all $400,000 and up, and you want to put 1,200 square foot homes right behind me, I mean, I didn't work my ass off to get where I'm at in life to deal with this. Like, my property value is going to plummet. Who's going to want to buy my house? Who's going to want to buy those $1 million homes that are in there when they want to sell them? I mean, you already got, how many schools do you have here? We got a school right up north and a school down south, and you're going to put an apartment complex there when you already have one a mile north and a mile south that aren't full. And all the stats we're getting are United States-wide based stats. This is Oklahoma. We're talking about parks in Philadelphia. Like, that park's half full, if not 3/4 full already. The parking lot's practically packed every time I drive by it. The road's flooded on a light rainy day straight across there where people hydroplane and everything else, and we're just now talking about all this construction, and yet 36 isn't wide. It's still just a single lane road. They had to have like 3 fatality crashes there at Franklin for people running stop signs that don't exist, that now we have to stop for them so they don't hit us. And now we're talking about putting, what, 700 more cars in that parking lot? Like, and I've never seen an apartment complex that has enough parking for what the visitors and everybody else. So now Ruby Grant Park's gonna be full of other people's cars for that. And I've never, ever seen stats on anything where you put more people in one place and it became safer. That is a lie. Never. And you'll have to excuse me, I'm a I'm a military guy, so I think about safety and I think about like my children. That's why I bought 2 acres, so that I can let them in the backyard and I got to worry about them going to run over, right? So how are you going to devalue everybody's homes in this area for what you think's going to bring in what? Luxury apartments? Like, because you think the park needs people there? The park isn't bringing y'all any money. And I know my taxes for my house have went up I don't know how many times in the last year because my house worth so much money. Well, is it going to go down now that you're building all these little tiny cookie cutter homes right behind me? I mean, it just seems kind of stupid to me. And then you got the guy that are talking about the dealership. He hadn't built that dealership.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for your comment. It's time. Does anybody else have any comments that they'd like to make? Does anybody else want to come to make a comment? Is there any other questions or commission discussion? Okay, yeah, come on up. If you will say your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Ramona Blue. I live at 5201 Crystal Spring Court. It would be our backyard where they start the street and the homes that they want to put in there. I want to tell you that we had one meeting that we had, like he said, maybe 28 minutes of listening to Richard McCown, and maybe 2 minutes of all of us asking questions that did not get answered. We asked how large those lots were. We asked how much square footage was in each one of those homes that he's putting right there behind our backyards. We did not get an answer. He said, well, maybe 1,200. No, I can't say 1,200. And then he never said any more. And now tonight, for the very first time, we hear that those are going to be duplexes. We have not ever been told that until we heard that tonight. Where are these duplexes? Because we had talked about the apartment building that we don't want with 350 apartments when we already have just north of us apartment building in Icon and south of us another apartment building that's right there across from Subway. What's the name of it? I counted up, if we had 350 apartments on the corner of Franklin and 36, that'll make 777 apartments in a 2-mile stretch where Crystal Springs Court is right in the middle of 777 apartments, all feeding out on 36th Avenue. Is that not enough apartments in a 2-mile stretch? What are you doing to our home values? And tonight we hear that those homes are going to be duplexes, and we really don't know how many are duplexes. Are they all duplexes? What is that going to do to our home values? Do you want your home values to be knocked down like that? Because someone decides we need 777 apartments and duplexes all built in right next to our homes? We have very nice homes in Crystal Springs Court, and we move there because we like the fresh air. We like our space. We move there because we want some peace. And bringing in all these extra people all condensed into one area like it's Philadelphia, that's not going to make us feel safer in our backyards. That's not going to make us feel safe when we take our children to that park. That is not going to help with Oklahoma, people in Norman, Oklahoma, to enjoy their peace. I am very much against this proposal, and I think there are so many great things that you could do with that piece of land. And I feel like we're really short done by now, just tonight, hearing about duplexes. We don't even know how many and where they're at. We did not have our answers when we asked.
Thank you. That's
Hi, I'm
okay.
James Arms, 5200 Crystal Springs Court. I've got a photo, if I could show each one of you, of the drainage that he's talking about trying to correct, which is not going to be corrected by his engineers or anything like that. Can I show it to you?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
That's my backyard. That's right on 36.
Do you want to show everybody too? I paused for a minute so you can have a chance to show everyone.
That's all the way to my backyard, all the way up, and they're going to try to correct that. Did you see it?
You might need to turn your screen back
Oh, yeah,
on.
it's starting to go dark. That's okay.
But that's all 36 coming this way, and you've got water coming from the north, the west, and the south.
It's set up by those two ponds and it's crossed over.
Yeah, this is my backyard. No, this is 36, this is right across the road.
Okay, okay.
So I mean, you see the kind of water flow, and I understand he's got numbers that everybody listens to and where he got them from. He's right, this is Oklahoma. And this is not gonna be corrected by how he's gonna do it. And he's gonna put a road right behind me and then flood my land. And that's very upsetting to me. So I don't need him to tell me about all this. He hadn't said anything to us. We had one meeting, like the gentleman said, and it's crap.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come up and make a comment? You're encouraged. I'd like to go ahead and bring up some additional questions because we did receive protest letters in advance. Some of them were several pages long and brought up some of the concerns some of the audience members also brought up. Specifically, there was the concern that we heard about the duplexes. I have not seen duplexes. I maybe missed where duplexes came in today. I did see single-family units and accessory dwelling units that could not be rented separately. Would you please make sure that that is absolutely clear and that there is not any duplex or where that misunderstanding would have come from?
Absolutely correct. There are no duplexes proposed at all tonight in this development. Where that comes from is the current existing 2025 plan for the site. So again, that is something that today is this whole site, not us. Norman's adopted policy for this site is duplexes throughout everything, apartment buildings throughout everything. That is not us. We are proposing single family, so no duplex.
Thank you for clarifying. So it's the Norman comp plan where duplexes were originally proposed, then that was not part of your proposal.
Absolutely right.
Also, while you're there, there was questions about the lot sizes and square feet of home that the residents, and that was something in their letters that we received had been a common thread issue. So I think there's going to be a question from us and likely council on that too to be addressed.
Yeah, certainly. These lot sizes are 60 by 120. If I'm remembering my math right, that's about 7,200 square feet, larger than the 6,000 square foot standard. You'll notice several of them along the north are substantially deeper than that. There's a significant easement running along all of the properties on the north, but some of them it's a very wide easement. So these are really pretty good sized lots. Many of them are pushing up to that over 10,000 square feet. These lots will sell in the $80,000 price range, and that kind of pushes the price of the homes into $450,000 to $500,000 range. We're not really big on limiting square footage. We're very much in favor of the jewel box style home, but when you set your lot price at $80,000, you don't get a affordable 1,200 square foot home. We would, when you have an $80,000 lot, if someone were to choose to build a 1,200 square foot home, they'd be spending, $300, maybe more $100 per square foot building that house to make it go with the lot price. Typically, a lot price is not more, it represents about 16% of the total cost of a house. So anyway, this is a luxury development. You'll notice the entire primary street is all a divided boulevard. This is not an affordable development to put in. There are only 47 home sites, and none of them are duplexes.
For point of reference on lot sizes, for the 7,200 square feet, I did look up R1 would be a minimum lot area of 6,000 for a point of reference of maybe what to compare in other neighborhoods. Not that everything is cookie cutter, but. Any other questions or discussion items for commission? If somebody else wants to make a comment, I'd be glad to take a comment. And just as a reminder, there is a second stage of everything for comment. Your city councilors are publicly appointed officials that meet with their citizens. You are their constituents. You have another round of protests and another round of public comment to make too. Just want to make sure everyone knows that after tonight too. I would love to see the developer have a meeting with their neighbors and maybe address some of their concerns before it went to council. I think that's a comment I made for the other two applicants, and it would be remiss of me not to make it here, especially since that's been a common concern on there, that if there was a meeting to discuss some of these concerns and maybe look at those and kind of meet with them a little bit more directly in some sort of a town hall in that particular neighborhood to the north having some of the highest concerns. So that would be a comment of something I would like to see happen, just as I mentioned that for the others.
We'd absolutely be happy to meet with the neighbors between now and council hearing.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make one comment. I think it's important to point out that it's been pointed out a couple times that what's called for in the existing comp plan, I'm not going to run numbers based on, square footage here, just eyeballing it, but my hunch is that this is actually a reduction in density from what's called for in the comp plan, because that's basically calls for a higher density use throughout the entire site. And so I can appreciate the thought put into where the densities lie in the site plan here, where it's a lower density on the north side, closer to Crystal Springs neighborhood, higher density on the south side, which also encourages park use and connectivity there. And I do like the incorporation of the ADU. Just to clarify, the ADU is not a duplex. A duplex can be rented by two different users. ADU is really intended for, it could be a child that lives in the back house, or like a child that lives in the house, or an aging parent, and so if we're talking about soft ways to increase density and encourage multi-generational aging in place, we need to be encouraging more ADUs throughout the entire city. And so I'm glad that there's an incorporation of that here, and it's, in my opinion, not something that is going to be intrusive or looked down upon by. In fact, it's going to be very attractive to people to have that option. So, but I would also echo Commissioner Byrd's comments regarding the developer meeting with the neighborhood neighbors to the north and anybody else who wants to meet with them, addressing any concerns. And I do think that despite being passed by floodplain, that just take a hard look at whatever's going on with the flooding issues here to see what can be addressed there. So.
Also, I think City Council might benefit from hearing where the status is of 36 Street's proposals as part of their vote on that too. I know it is proposed to go 4-lane, but I think it was supposed to have already been 4-lane a few times, or, there's a budgeting as far as federal match funds, but I think that might be items they will probably want to know as well.
And on that, I do think that 4 lanes may be appropriate along 36, but again, just for long-term use of that park, I would just suggest a hard look at never widening Franklin as much as you can, because I think that that's really important for what's being intended with this use here and the activation of that park, so.
Any other planning commission discussion or questions?
I would just say I do like how much green there was. When you hear the description of what's going to go in there right next to the park, you know, I was a little concerned, but then when getting through the packet, reviewing it the other night, I was really happy to see so much green. I feel like it marries living and the park together, and I heard that was your intent. I know it's never ideal to have a field behind you turned into something else, but compared to the original plan and intention in mind, I think this does a lot to protect the value of those homes in Crystal Springs. With that said, my concerns are traffic. I've been on 36 a number of times, and I feel like the four-way stop, albeit new, is insufficient for traffic at times without the apartments going in, and the flooding. Those are two concerns that I have that I think the city and the developers need to get some answers to those already living in the area before it, you know, is approved at council.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments, questions, discussion? Okay, I would entertain a motion if there's no other discussion. And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has, the motion carried 6-0.
Moving to our last item, number 14, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-7, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Section 36-552 fencing, walls, and screening of Chapter 36 zoning of the Code of the City of Norman to allow for administrative review and approval of requests for variations in fence height forward of the front setback line and providing for the severability thereof. The city has requested to withdraw this item, so if we could take a motion for that unless there's any other discussion.
I'll motion to withdraw.
Second.
Approve the withdrawal. Well, we have a motion. Can we go ahead and vote on it? Is it a problem if we vote on it? We have a motion on the floor.
Can I withdraw my motion?
As a point of order, do we need to make a motion to withdraw this, approve the withdrawal? So if we already have made one, is that a issue? Should we go ahead and complete the vote? Sorry, I try to be a little bit better with the decorum.
Ironically, you'll want to withdraw the motion.
Okay.
I motion to withdraw my motion.
To approve withdrawal.
Motion withdrawn.
Okay. All right. Do we have to vote on that motion? So sorry. All right. Is there any staff miscellaneous discussion for the commission? Do the commissioners have any comments they'd like to make?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else to come before the commission, then I'll declare the meeting adjourned. I mean, I guess you could have withdrawn from the last one, I guess, too, but. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, she probably could have voted to be recused from all of it.